T minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Right now on Truth Today, Red State Mirage, how conservative leadership in red states are selling out to Muslim refugees and the scam of the refugee resettlement program. Also, we're going to be talking about the Afghans, Islamic Jihad through Hijra, their migration, and more right now on Truth Today. Well, good afternoon, folks, if you're on East Coast time. Good morning if you're on any other time zone on the West Coast or central part of America or up in Canada. Of course, we also welcome any of our foreign guests. We have some folks from Israel watching us, so we welcome all of you here today, The Truth Today. Pastor Sharam Hadian with you live in studio. Again, apologize about the late start. Always can't control just some minor tech issues this morning with our live stream. So I just had to work that out. Thank you guys for your patience. I'm going to be waiting upon some folks to jump on here with us. We are live streaming to our Rumble channel, which is our main platform, but also to Facebook, YouTube, and we also do Podbean. So for those of you who want to listen to audio only, you can go to our Podbean. Check out my name, Sharam Hadian, or Truth Today. It should come up on Podbean or any of the platforms that just do MP3s for audio. Want to also remind you again, if you want to know more information, we are actively right now working on our 2026 travel schedule. Already, it is rounding out. We have January, I'll be back in Texas. February, I'll be in Bakersfield, California, also in Western Washington. We'll have all of those uploaded here soon to our website. Then we're working on Minnesota trips, more Texas. We'll be back in Idaho in later June. So anyway, we've got lots of stuff going on. So if you want us to come to your area, let us know. Also, please let us know where you are from. Thank you, all of you who are on our live chat, especially on Rumble, who are letting us know where you're from. It is so encouraging to see all of God's people coming together for joining us today. We are here in East Tennessee. Rainy day today. I know some of you looks like you are in much colder weather. So praying everybody stays warm today on this day. Again, rumble.com. If you are not on our main platform, rumble.com/Ram Hadian is our main platform. Please do us a favor and click join if you're not subscribed. As I mentioned last show, we are officially well over our 3,000 subscribers between our two channels. So thank you all for joining. We've added, I think my wife said, about 200 subscribers just in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So praise God for that, as the message is getting out, as more people are waking up to what is going on in our nation and around the world in these last days. So please click join, like, and share if you appreciate the content on Rumble. All right, I think we're ready to jump into the show today. My show today is based on a few articles that was written by Rare Foundation talking about red states. And this is something, if those of you guys who know our ministry, know my background, you know, when I lived in Washington State, ran for governor, was very involved in trying to warn the Pacific Northwest about what was going on. At the time I was in Washington State, I was heavily working in the state of Idaho with Christian activists and even elected officials. My good friend, Representative Heather Scott, who is a legislator in the state of Idaho. Man, we tried to bring so many warnings about what was going on with the refugees coming in, these unvetted refugees, the danger that they pose. At that time, predominantly, we were witnessing the Syrian refugees, the Muslims that were coming in from Syria. Now we are beginning to discover this massive unvetted pool of refugees from Afghanistan, the Afghans, as you guys like to call them. And of course, this came to the forefront with the shooting of the 2 National Guardsmen in DC just a little while ago. Of course, the one succumbed to her injuries, was murdered. And the other one, good news, yesterday he woke up. Apparently he's finally responding now. So we're praying for his recovery there. The second National Guardsman that was shot by this Afghani illegal who was a Biden entry through this program that they were doing before the botched debacle that was the so-called Afghan withdrawal back in 2021, which again, in my opinion, was completely intentional. That was not a botched withdrawal. That was an intentional withdrawal, leaving over $80+ billion of military assets to the Taliban, which really is China. I said this before, China is the one that was running, that is now in control of Afghanistan. The Taliban are, of course, there. We see the formation of ISIS now again, the Islamic State in Afghanistan, along with Al-Qaeda. So it just breeds this violence. But today we're focusing on specifically the awareness that is coming to the refugees. And in this case, again, the Afghani ones. But I want to call this show today, I've called it the Red State Mirage. Because we believe that because if we live in a red state, that we're safe, that we're comfortable, that we're protected, that there's sort of this firewall in America. And yet you'll see that our conservative, not liberal, our conservative leaders have been selling us out for money, for profit, to unvetted Islamic refugees who not only hate this nation, but have the doctrine, especially from Afghanistan, especially from Somalia. You're talking about places that are below third world, tribal 7th century Islam. The Somali Muslims coming from Somalia, the Afghani Muslims coming from Afghanistan. We're talking 7th century Islam. We're talking everything that you saw that was the cesspool of Islam in the 7th century under Muhammad and subsequently following. That's what those nations are steeped in. And we're importing this here. And of course, more evidence came out that this Afghani was trained by the CIA. That the CIA, I don't want to have his picture up too long because it makes me sick. Young 20-year-old, young woman in her prime, murdered by this jihadist yelling Allah Akbar. And yet, the media, there's a headline on NPR. I don't know if I have this up there. Yes, I do. Look at this headline from NPR. Once again, we cannot figure out motivation. Even though the guy was shouting Allah Akbar, Allah is the greatest, as he shot, murdered one, and now the second one still fighting for his life. And now we find out he's trained by the CIA. The CIA, this is a special ops guy. This wasn't some Joe Blow Afghani. This was a guy that our CIA trained. Special ops. He was part of a special ops force in Afghanistan. They were a brutal force. They were known for killing civilians, trained by our government, folks. Allowed into this nation by our government. And here's the NPR headline. Afghan suspect in DC National Guard attack appeared to suffer personal crisis. Yeah, it has nothing to do with jihad. It has nothing to do with Islam. It's just personal crisis. He was suffering a meltdown. He was suffering a breakdown. No, what he was suffering was a demonic, murderous rage by the Antichrist spirit that is in him, that is Islam. And this is, again, what we're importing, not just in blue states, like in Washington State, where I used to live, but now in red states. Because when I was in Washington State, we were warning Idaho. At that time, Boise, Idaho, folks, was bringing in per capita more refugees than any other state in the country. And predominantly they were coming to Boise and Twin Falls, cheap labor. There was the Chobani yogurt factory. That's why I don't buy Chobani yogurt. Chobani is owned by a Turkish Muslim. You may not know this. Turkish Muslim owns Chobani and hiring cheap refugee labor to work in these factories in Twin Falls area and in South Idaho. And at that time, we were warning. In fact, I had a presentation that we did at the Idaho State Capitol for legislators on the refugee resettlement scam. The refugee resettlement scam. The backstory of refugee resettlement, all the money. I'm going to go through all this with you guys here today. I'm going to go through all of this and talk about the fake charities that are now getting close to $6 billion a year of government tax. Our dollars, our tax dollars, are actually going to resettle. And conservative leadership, according to RARE, and I'll bring this up just in a little bit, according to RARE Foundation, conservative leadership in Florida, in Oklahoma, in Texas, in Idaho, they have been South Dakota. I've fought this in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Conservative leadership has been selling us out because of money. And yet the burden, when these refugees come in, the burden, folks, is on the taxpayers. So we're now beginning to find out that under Oh, Biden's administration, under Biden, the evil regime that, you know, was not Biden. Obviously, we know Biden wasn't running anything, as we're finding out with the auto pen scandal. And, you know, again, I've been critical of the president on some things, but I will say good for him that he issued the executive order saying that we're going to nullify the majority of the stuff that was signed by the auto pen. It's illegal. And so this is not, look, you've seen the articles. Like, here's the article. Trump was critical of Tim Walz there in Minnesota. Blast Tim Walz returning Minnesota into Somalia. Amplifies rare AMEX report exposing statewide colonization. Okay, so obviously, you guys know I've been to Minnesota 28 times in the last 7 or 8 years. I'm going there again this year. We've been warning about what's going on in Minnesota, but it's easier to look at Minnesota and say, oh, well, that's Minnesota, or that's Michigan, or that's California, or that's Washington, or that's New York, because those are blue states. Those are liberal states. The liberals are insane. They're nuts. They're welcoming all these illegals in. They're footing the illegals to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. The fraud, the worst fraud, welfare fraud. Now we find out in Minnesota that they were committing, the Somalis are committing fraud for autism. They're claiming their children are autistic in order to get money from a program to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. The welfare fraud, the social welfare fraud in Minnesota now is in the billions of dollars of tax dollars that Minnesotans are footing. And so what this system is a sellout, and our conservative leadership, Utah, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, our governor here in Tennessee, selling us out by welcoming in Muslims into this state, welcoming in refugees, unvetted. Now, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I don't have a fundamental problem with the concept of refugees, because the concept of refugees is that, okay, if you have legitimate refugee seekers, if you have legitimate, for example, Christians right now, what about the Nigerian Christians, the Sudanese Christians, the Syrian Christians, who are literally being massacred daily? How come we're not bringing any of them in? How come the United Nations, that's picking these refugees for the sending our way along with the State Department, how come they are not picking the Christians? No, let's just bring in all the Muslims. And then we wonder why they get trained. Here's another article. Look at this article from Geller. Mohammed Bomber, Afghan Muslim migrant arrested in terror plot to blow up Fort Worth, Texas, just 2 days ago. And you wonder why this is happening. Now, some of you are asking the question, how do we navigate this spiritually to not have hate towards individuals? This has been the battle of our ministry, right? Is to speak the truth in love. And brothers and sisters, this is so difficult because we are to hate evil. The Bible tells us that absolutely God hates evil. And that's why I've said so many times, I hate the ideology, I hate the evil, I hate the corruption in our government, the corruption in the entirety of this refugee resettlement program, or whatever it may be. When you see evil being perpetrated, we ought to hate the system, we ought to hate the corruption, we ought to hate the evil. And in this case, I absolutely despise and hate the evil ideology that is Islam. And yes, there's even anger in our hearts towards individuals that carry out heinous acts, carry out acts on behalf of Satan, because that's what this is. This ideology of Islam is satanic. It's demonic. There's nothing of God in it. But at the same time, we have to guard our hearts from hating individuals, remembering that our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and the principalities. We have to, and one of you asked here, it's hard for me to forgive. And I agree. It is hard to forgive. And forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, right? And loving our enemies doesn't mean we forgive them or condone, I should say, what they're doing. But understand that those like me who were in Islam were betrayed, were deceived, were under an antichrist spirit. And only when Christ sets us free are our eyes open and our minds open to understand what we were in. That's why I so vehemently, passionately will continue to expose the evil ideology and the work of Satan. Our ministry will continue to expose the works of darkness, as the Bible says. Jesus came to expose the works of darkness. He didn't come to give everybody just a hug. He came to bring salvation, bring the way that there was no way, and he came to expose the works of darkness and lead people into the light. So you can hate their actions, you can hate the ideology, you can even be mad at the person, but choose to walk in the forgiveness in the sense of not letting your hearts be hardened by this evil. Because at the end of the day, nothing will change their ideology or their behavior other than the gospel of Jesus Christ. And if we don't have the love of God for the lost, then we will not ever share the gospel. Because when I see Muslims out and about, especially the women, they may hate us. In their hearts, they hate us. In their hearts, they're at war with us. But in my heart, I pray for them. In my heart, I pray, Holy Spirit, reveal yourself to them. Reveal yourself to them. And I pray that will be helpful, because we got to pray for their soul. We got to pray for their soul. And Georgina, that's a great question about so-called secular Muslims and jihadists. I'll answer that later. Let me hang on to that, and we can get to that. But as some of you are saying rightly, we must have compassion upon those who are deceived, not to forgive or even to forget the evil that they do. Because it's not my job, unless they perpetrate it against me personally, it's not my job to forgive these evil people. That's the Lord. The Lord exacts justice and vengeance. But it is my job to make sure that I don't let that hate harbor. So I hope that helps. But anyway, let's go back to this red state, Mirage, and how we are being sold a bill of goods about what's going on with conservative leaderships. I want to start by looking at Utah. So if you go to Rare Foundation, they have multiple articles here about these red states, so-called red states, and how they're selling us out. Here is an article, Red State Traitor, Governor Spencer Cox, by the way, a Mormon, right? Betrayed Utah and imported a Taliban-era population into a conservative state. Again, that's not surprising, because when I was working in Idaho, by the way, when we had that event, I forgot to mention, when we had that event at the Idaho State Capitol, warning about refugee resettlements, we had the biggest protest I've ever had. Hundreds of people came out, including the LGBTQ, all the interfaith Christians, along with Muslims, along with CARE, the Council on American and Islamic Relations, trying to shut us down, trying to silence us out. Thank God that they could not stop the event. But that's the type of of pressure because, oh, we're going to be a welcoming state. We're going to welcome all these people in. And yet we see again and again and again the failure of immigration and bringing unvetted refugees. I was saying earlier, again, I'm not opposed to the concept of refugees. I think there's legitimate refugees. But this program, the refugee resettlement program, started by Jimmy Carter in 1980, when the first 2 or 3 years, they were bringing in 200,000 to 300,000 refugees into this nation. We estimate today we're talking about somewhere 30 to 50 million refugees have been brought in since 1980. This number, which is hard to even quantify, the economic impact, the drain on social welfare. Again, as I said, Minnesota is the poster child of this social welfare scam, and how the Somalis are stealing the money through social welfare programs, and then they're remitting it, they're sending it back to Somalia. So we know that our government tax dollars are going to fund jihadist groups like the particular jihadist group that is part of the tribe of Ilhan Omar in Somalia. They're going to fund them like Al-Shabaab in Somalia. In Somalia, our tax dollars being sent back. So going back to this article, Red State Traders, August 2021, as the Taliban seized control and U.S. intelligence admitted real vetting was impossible in Afghanistan, Spencer Cox wrote Biden a glowing letter. Quote, Utah is eager to help. Quote, Utah has a long history of welcoming refugees. Quote, send them here. This is treasonous, folks. Treasonous. Idaho did the same thing. And thanks to their Mormon population in Idaho, they were very welcoming in Idaho. He volunteered Idaho. Did he ask anybody? No. Cox didn't just accept them, he fought for them. Created the, quote, Afghan Community Fund, a partnership with Zion's Bank, the World Trade Center, Utah, and the state's refugee networks to finance mass intake. Pressured Utahns to offer housing. While Utah families were struggling with housing shortages and soaring costs, Cox urged residents to, quote, step up and take in refugees, advocated for permanent residency, celebrated their arrival. 6 months after the airlift, Cox bragged on TV about 900 Afghan refugees already resettled in Utah and held public ceremonies honoring them on the House floor. He did all this while mosques multiply across the state. Utah, the state many believed was sheltered from Islamic political influence, is now seeing mosque expansions, new Islamic centers, rapid demographic change, aggressive NGO-led migration campaigns, Cox called this compassion and Utah values. Even though the people of Utah didn't vote for that. Because refugee resettlement is a business, a big one. And I'm going to be showing you that more in a minute. Behind Cox stands an entire lucrative machine, the Utah Department of Workforce Services. Asha Parekh, Director of Refugee Services. No wonder she was named, quote, Utah Businesswoman of the Year. NGO resettlement networks, interfaith groups, corporate donors, left-wing foundations. Millions in federal and state funds flowed for these Afghan arrivals, jobs, grants, housing contracts, legal aid pipelines, NGO salaries, on and on. You can read the article yourself. Then the article, there's another article here. This one. Here's Florida. Here's Florida. Florida's right state illusion shattered inside the $1 billion Afghan pipeline and CARE's quiet takeover. Again, folks, this is what we got to know. This is what's got to be exposed. Because people do not understand that this is first and foremost about money. Fake charities. Again, I'm going to go through these charities and these so-called charities in a minute. I have been talking about this for at least the last 10 years. And there's others before. Many others before that have been warning, like a gal named Ann Corcoran. And I'll get to Ann Corcoran. Some of you may be familiar with Ann Corcoran. And she used to have a site called Refugee Resettlement. It's still up online, but it hasn't been updated. I think she kind of backed away because she was so overwhelmed by the attacks. Because when you go, listen, the worst protests I've ever had speaking when it was dealing with refugees, because you get all of these individuals coming out of the woodworks like little cockroaches because you're now going after the money. You're warning about what's going on because it's all about money. All these interfaith groups and NGOs and VOLAGs, which is voluntary local organizing groups. These VOLAGs, they're getting now billions of dollars. But let me go to Florida, the Afghan pipeline. Since 2021, again, look at the damage that was done under fake President Biden. Nearly 200,000 Afghans have entered the United States through emergency parole-based programs with expedited, abbreviated vetting, meaning no vetting. The same pipeline federal watchdogs reportedly warned was vulnerable to identity fraud, criminal infiltration, and terrorism-linked entrance. Red states absorbed the majority. Florida became one of the top destinations. That was not an accident, folks. They targeted red states. 2,000 plus Afghans settled in Florida during the initial wave. 1,000 plus arrivals processed by Lutheran Social Services in Florida in 2021 alone. Florida officials admit the state absorbed over 5,000 refugee entrance arrivals every year since 2021. South Florida, the numbers were even more concentrated. Miami-Dade became a, quote, welcome hub under Mayor Daniela Cava. Miami-Dade embraced its role as a major landing zone. We are proud, quote, to host Afghan families. We welcome them with open arms. Our home is their home. County agencies publicly prepared for large-scale Afghan arrivals, and CARE Florida, again, Muslim Brotherhood, celebrate the effort. This was not fringed. Money, here goes the money, folks. Florida cashed enormous federal checks to fuel the operation. $990 million from the Office of Refugee Resettlement in 2023. $1.2 billion from the Office of Refugee Resettlement in 2024. Guys, this is under DeSantis. You understand? This is happening under a Republican governor. That's why I'm saying that conservatives are selling us out for money. So this idea that, oh, we're in a red state and we're safe. We're safe from jihadist activity. We're safe from this fraud and corruption. No. This is a massive, again, refugee resettlement scam. Massive. And I'm going to show you in a minute the doctrine behind it. Let me go through his really quick. Hundreds of millions more during the 2021-2022 Afghan surge. For every Afghan arrival, federal contractors and their partner agencies received $2,275 in immediate reception and placement funding, plus thousands more per family for housing, medical care, food, legal services, transportation, school enrollment, and cash assistance. Now, you got to understand, every dollar that is given out to these agencies, the agency's got to skim off the top, right? The agency's got to take a little bit off the top, a little bit, whatever that percentage is, for their agency fees. So they're not just getting the initial amount for settlement, they're then getting all the post amounts, and now these agencies are cashing in buco bucks. Buco bucks. Let's continue. CARE Florida was inside the system. Few Floridians know that CARE Florida is an active member of the Florida Refugee Assistance Committee. The coalition created to coordinate services for arriving refugees and parolee families. Through this official structure, CARE Florida provided immigration and legal support, delivered, quote, cultural orientation and rights-based coaching. That means they help them to continue to follow Islam. Work directly with state and county officials, help shape long-term integration. Why is Care Florida working with state officials? Why didn't DeSantis cut off Care Florida? You see, lots of talk by conservative leaders. They throw red meat out to us, but action speaks louder than their words. Gain institutional access to Florida's resettlement network. From resettlement to political power, CARE's new plan. Beginning in late 2024, CARE Florida launched statewide, quote, advocacy hubs, an explicitly political infrastructure designed to reshape Florida's electoral landscape. CARE's own materials openly state the goal, quote, empower Muslims to have significant impact on government decisions, quote, grow the power of the Florida Muslim caucus, and be a powerful voting bloc for decades to come. The GOP betrayal. While all this was unfolding, Florida's Republican supermajority unanimously passed CARE Florida's celebrated, quote, Muslim American Heritage Month resolution. Stayed silent about the scale and cost of the Afghan influx, allowed CARE and its partners to embed deeper inside state systems, returned $557 million in unspent refugee resettlement in unspent refugee service funds without offering any public account of how the earlier surge year money, nearly $3 billion, was allocated or distributed. This is, again, under a Republican governor, under a Republican supermajority in the state of Florida. You want one more? Should we do one more? How about Oklahoma? Here is Oklahoma. Red state illusion shattered. Conservative leaders imported thousands of unvetted refugees. Here we go. Why would a conservative state accept this? These aren't a few families. These are large clan-based communities arriving in the thousands, many with women in full burqas, strict Sharia norms, cultural practices fundamentally incompatible with American law. Oklahomans paid for free housing, free food, free ESL classes, free transportation, free cultural orientation, pipeline into the Muslim business network, all organized by NGOs, these VOLAGs, and at the federal ones and local. Again, this is exactly what we were warning about in Idaho when I was there, and I've talked to other legislators. This is exactly what we were telling them about, is that this pipeline is where the money is. Follow the money, you'll find the pipeline. This is exactly what got us death threats in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, because when Brandon House and I did our event there in Sioux Falls, South Dakota in 2017, when the heavily armed Muslim man came into our conference, part of it was because we were warning about the refugee resettlement scam and how they were coming into Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and they were trying to make Sioux Falls, South Dakota into Minneapolis. That's what they're still working on with their Muslim Brotherhood affiliated, CARE affiliated lawyer, Taniza Islam, who's now twice run for mayor. Every time she gets more support, every time she gets more votes. Don't be shocked if one day Sioux Falls, South Dakota has a Muslim mayor. Don't be shocked, South Dakota. Don't be shocked, Sugar Land, Texas, when I was there. I said that to you last week. If the church doesn't wake up. So as that 29-year-old Afghan refugee imported through that program, shot 2 National Guardsmen, how many more are infiltrated? How many more are sleeper cells? How many more were trained by our special forces like this guy? How many more are sitting and waiting? I read an article last week. That was a good article. It talked about, if you think this guy worked alone, if you think this was an isolated event in Washington, D.C., no, they're testing. We've been warning about a coordinated attack. And the FBI, folks, I'm sorry to say, has no stinking clue, because they cannot vet based on ideology. They cannot vet based on motivations of jihad. They attack like the guy in Boulder, Colorado, with throwing Molotov cocktails at Jewish Holocaust survivors, and the police. We don't know. We don't know what the motivation is. Yeah, but he was shouting Allah Akbar. We don't know what the motivation is. He had personal crisis. He was going through a personal issue. So we're being sold out. Now, let me get to Ann Corcoran before I get to the ideology. Because Ann Corcoran was on the forefront of exposing the refugee resettlement scam and the massive amount of money. Now, you see on that screen there a list of, at that time, 9 major so-called charities, VOLAGs. And you see there that based on, she did a filing on their Form 990 and was able to find out how much government tax dollars was going to church. Now, look at these. The majority of these are, quote, faith-based. Church World Services, Ethiopian Community Development. You have Episcopal Migration, Hebrew Immigrant Society. You had U.S. Conference United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. That's the Catholic Church. Basically, World Relief, Lutheran Immigration. So the majority of these are at that time, and there's now another one that's been added called Bethany. So now there's, out of 10, you see 3 are secular, 7 are, quote, faith-based. And yet these faith-based charities, World Relief connected to many, many evangelicals, are getting now close to $6 billion. I'm going to do a screen share, and I'm going to show you this real quick. I want to show you, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to show you here. Okay, let me make myself a little bit smaller here. And let's go through this. So look at this. So here is Ethiopian Community Development. This is, now remember, this is in 2017. Okay, remember, this is 2017. That is 8 years ago. Imagine what these numbers are now after the floodgates were opened under Biden. Okay? So Church World Services right here. Let me go back to small screen. And let me go up here. Okay, so Church, you see Church World Services. 70, at that time, 71% of their funding as a faith-based coming from the government. $88 million at that. That's back in 2016. No one's doing this type of research now. And Corcoran was doing this research. No one's doing this kind of research now that I know of. Chief Executive Officer Reverend John McCullough makes an annual salary of $251,000. So the reverend that's running at making $2.25 million salary. Ethiopian Community Development Council, 93% funding from tax dollars. President Tehai Tafara, compensation of $171,000. Episcopal Migration Ministries, aka Domestic and Foreign Mission Society of the Episcopal Church, 99.5% of their funding coming from tax dollars. Hebrew Immigrant Society, 57% from tax dollars, $40 million in total revenue. Look at their chief executive officer, $358,000 a year salary. International Rescue Committee, 66.5%. $688 million annual revenue. Head honcho David Miliband, $591,000 a year salary. U.S. Committee for Refugees and Reimmigration, 98% funding. And President CEO Lavinia Limon, $260,000. Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Resettlement or Services, 96 to 97% taxpayer funded. And let's see, does it say how much their chief executive officer is making here? Oh, yes. LIRS President CEO Linda Hark makes an annual salary of $274,000, additional $33,000 from another source. World Relief, National Association of Evangelicals, folks. National Association of Evangelicals, 72.8% funded by tax dollars. President CEO doesn't make a whole lot, but some financial officer Barry Howard is making over $250,000. So this gives you again, remember, these are 2017 numbers. 2017 numbers, folks, for what is coming in, for what is being brought in. It is unbelievable. And as I've covered, by the way, our brand new DVD, where is it here? Battle for America. I just had it. Where'd it go? Sorry, give me 1 second. Right here. Our brand new DVD, Battle for America, Islamic Sabotage and Our Response. In it, which I talk about this Hijra, this Islamic doctrine, that is now available for pre-order. So if you'd like to go to our order page on our website, just go to tillministry.com/order. And if you go to the drop down, when you can pick which one you want. We don't have a page for it yet, just for that. But if you go down the drop down, you should see pre-order for Battle for America. And if you want to get your copy now, the flash drives are going out very soon. We already got if you want a flash drive, we already got those ready to go. If you want a DVD, there's still a few weeks out, but you can do your pre-order now and get those there. But in the Battle for America, what I highlight is the Hijra. And so this is part of the reason, folks, that we are seeing Muslims not assimilate is because this is part of Islamic doctrine. It's called the Hijra. It's when Muhammad supposedly immigrated from Mecca to Medina to gain power and control. And in the Hijra, which is actually the word for migration, it tells them to do three things. One, it tells them to migrate. So go and migrate. Go into an area that is not Islamic, that is not controlled by Muslims. And you know, begin to go, use the system, use the money, use the welfare, doesn't matter. Whatever it takes, migrate. Number two, you see here, is populate. And again, we've talked about this before, the Islamic birth rate is significantly higher than Western rates. So the birth rate right now for Western Europeans, non-Muslims in Western Europe is about 1.4. In America, our birth rate is about 1.7. In order to have a society not die out, your birth rate must be at a minimum of 2.1. 2.1 or higher. So we are literally dying out. Meanwhile, the average Muslim birth rate is over 4. In Europe, it's 4.7 to 5.1. Last year in France, 43% of children born were Muslim. 43. Almost 1 out of 2 children that were born in the country of France was Muslim. In the UK, that was 40%. So demographic wise, they're going to take over by birth rate. That's part of Hijra. In fact, they call that Jihad Walada, Jihad of the womb. So that's part of Jihad. And number 3, they're called to segregate. That's how they establish enclaves. That picture on the screen there is Hamtramck, Michigan, the first Muslim majority city in America, soon to be followed by Dearborn Heights. And based on my experience recently in Texas, we're seeing evidence of these massive enclaves, obviously Plano, East Plano, Irving. You have, of course, Sugar Land outside of Houston. Houston, as I've said, the second largest Muslim population in America, besides New York. And what happens? This is being welcomed. This is not being opposed by the Christian church. The Christian church doesn't understand anything that's going on. Governments are doing this. So it's not just really, I could say, listen, I could say it's not just a sellout by conservative leadership in these red states. It's a sellout by the churches. It's a sellout by the so-called fake charities. Or not so-called, these are fake charities. It's a sellout by evangelical leaders. It's a sellout by Catholic leaders. It's a sellout when they make deals with the devil for money. And so if these colonels, to your point that you just made on the chat, if these folks are supposed to be, if they're supposed to be Christian charities, faith-based charities, then why are they taking government tax dollars? Why are they taking the tax dollars and using it? They're not charities, they're fake charities. They're not charities, they're fake charities, folks. And yeah, Dick, great point. The Vatican actively promotes unlimited migration as a basic human right in support of their, quote, faith partner, Islam. And so, yeah, but remember, Dick, others remember, this is part of Agenda 2030, right? The replacement, the migration replacement, the great replacement. They identified top 8 Western first world countries like the United States, Canada, Japan, and in Western Europe that have low birth rates. And their solution was, we're going to open the floodgates and bring unvetted refugees from the Middle East, from North Africa. So what they do is they create the chaos. They destabilize these governments, like in Afghanistan, like in Syria, like in Iraq. And then let's bust them in, fly them in, ship them in, and they will be the replacement. They will be the workers. They will be the replacement. That's why the Western European countries have turned a blind eye to the Muslim rape gangs. Because the Muslim rape gangs that are raping European girls and women, hey, however you can have children, let's have children. Meanwhile, it's self-destruction. It's committing suicide. It is destroying Western civilization. It is destroying Christianized Western civilization. And it is the spiritual deception of the hour. The whole interfaith, multi-faith, Abrahamic faith lie that the Catholic Church is steeped in, that the Protestant churches are steeped in, that the evangelical churches are steeped in, that the what was the organization that Ann Corcoran said? The Evangelical Immigration. Where is it? Right here. Yeah, National Association of Evangelicals, World Relief, right? So these organizations, like U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, 97%, 99%, 96%, when the majority of their funding is coming from our tax dollars, that means they cannot survive. Now, the only positive thing, well, two positive things. One is, because Trump did put some sort of a moratorium on the refugees coming in right now, U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops ended their contract with the State Department, because you have to understand, predominantly the United Nations picks them. They work with the State Department. The State Department then works with these VOLAGs or NGOs to resettle them. Now, what they want from the state and federal, the state and local governments is they want no pushback. They could stop it. Your Republican governors could stop it, folks. Your local mayors could stop it. Your city council could stop it by saying we refuse to take any. But no, we're going to be a welcoming community like Cox in Utah. We're going to welcome them open arms like the mayor of Boise did, like the governor of Idaho did when I was working over there. They didn't fight it. They didn't fight it. And so this is a sellout, a compromise. It is the sellout and the compromise from the Christian churches, all those engaged in ecumenicalism and interfaith. And it is a sellout from our government. So we better wake up and understand there is no red state wall when it comes to the takeover of our nation by our enemies. This is big business, folks. And we need to go to our state legislators and our Republican governors, and we need to put them on notice. Now, Trump says we're going to vet or we're going to put a stop. Yeah, well, the way you put a stop is, Mr. President, you immediately executive order that the State Department refuses to work with the UN, refuses to bring any refugees in. And then, yes, you got to go through and you got to kick every one of them out. The majority of these Afghans should be vetted and kicked out. The majority of the Syrian Muslims should be vetted and kicked out. The majority of the Pakistani Muslims should be vetted and kicked out. These are enemies of this republic. And it is not compassionate to welcome enemies within your land and a foreign God that seeks to destroy you. That's not compassion. That's not what the Bible calls for. That's not the welcoming the stranger among us verse that these Christians will use to completely throw it out of context. Because in Leviticus, in Exodus, when God says to welcome the sojourner, the foreigner among us, the foreigner was subject to every law of Israel. They were supposed to assimilate into Israel and the laws of Israel and the God of Israel. They were not allowed to bring their foreign gods. They were not allowed to overthrow. They were not allowed to steal all our resources like these Muslims are doing and these NGOs are doing and these VOLAGs are doing. Every single one of these organizations should be audited, should be brought up before congressional hearings, and should be shown to explain how they're claiming to be Christian. Look at some of these headlines. Pamela Geller had an article, "Deport all Afghans." Deport, exactly. In my opinion, I agree. Deport all Afghans. Now, according to this article, USCIS announces it is suspending all immigration applications for Afghan nationals effective immediately. Okay, well, that's just a suspension. This would include work permits, asylum and refugee requests, naturalization, family benefits, etc. USCIS oversees legal immigration into the U.S. This is, of course, after the killing or the shooting of the National Guardsman and the killing of one so far by this so-called Muslim or Afghan refugee that, again, are CIA trained. This guy was a Afghan special ops. Look at this. Mass Muslim mobs. Mass Muslim mobs burn American flags at Philadelphia City Hall, waving Palestinian banners and chanting as the flames spread. The anti-Israel mob, 400 strong, clashing with police, vandalism. They were, quote, all out for Gaza. brazenly flaunting Hezbollah and Hamas symbols. Again, all out. Every one of them should be kicked out. Every single one of them. We better get into deporting, because if we don't, here's what we're going to be facing. Where is this one here? Did it go or not? I don't know if it came through. Holiday hell. Masked Muslims storm Brussels Christmas market, hurl smoke bombs at Christian families. Oh, here's a video I wanted to show real quick before we go. This is in New York. Listen to this. Listen to this. Muslims in Times Square. Now they've got Mamdani, right? They got Mamdani. And so now they got Mamdani. Now they're in the upper house. Now they're being bold. Listen to what he says. Do I have audio? Yes.
We're done hiding. We're done. We're done being tortured and hurt and judged. This is the correct religion. This is the religion that all of humanity needs to be upon, of Islam. And we will not stop until it enters every home. So I want you to repeat after me. I want to hear it in every single district. It should tremble. Brooklyn should hear it. The Bronx should hear it. Queens should hear it. Say it as if the Ummah depends on this, my brothers and sisters. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadan Rasulullah. There is no God worthy of worship except Allah, the God of Jesus, the God of Moses, the God of Abraham, and the God of the last and final prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
So that doesn't sound very much like they're going to coexist, right? Right? When they're telling you now, this is what we are doing. This is our mission. We're going to have Islam in every home. And there, he said the so-called Islamic call of prayer that's being broadcast in Dearborn and in Minneapolis and in New York City, and was broadcast in Sugar Land, Texas, which is why we were there last weekend, to stand up. So for all those out there who want to get timid, for all those out there, we don't want to offend the Muslims. Well, guess what? They're pretty bold, aren't they? Guess what? They're pretty bold, standing in Times Square, kneeling and praying and declaring the Arhan, which is that there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is the final messenger. This is what they're declaring over America. This is what they're declaring over New York City. This is what they're declaring, folks. They want to subjugate us, our children, our families, every Christian. There is no coexisting with this ideology. There is no coexisting with these people. So either the church better get out of their slumber and get trained to evangelize these Muslims boldly, not with common ground. You saw what he said. Allah is the God of Jesus, the God of Moses, the God of... No, Allah is Baal. Allah is a demon. Allah is Satan. And Muhammad is a false prophet. For there is but one true God. That's exactly what I said last Saturday in Sugar Land, Texas, on a loudspeaker, when they said when they prayed that very phraseology in Sugar Land, Texas. We went. This is how we do it. We went, and I said right there, despite the fact that some in that organizing committee were waffling and were nervous about what I was going to say, I said there is but one God. Allah is not God. It is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose name is Yahweh, whose name is Jesus Christ, whose name is Yeshua. And we lift up that name over Sugar Land, Texas. And we got to lift up that name over New York City, and that name over Michigan and Minnesota and Texas and Oklahoma and Florida and Tennessee and Idaho and South Dakota. Wake up, folks. Wake up your legislators. Wake up your elected officials, and wake up your pastors. It's now or never, because for Western Europe, it's too late. Too late. Too late. They're talking about civil war. except they've been disarmed. And so this is the hour. This is the time now or never. America will be gone. Your red state buffer is gone. These Muslims and the Muslim Brotherhood has infiltrated. They've taken over the Democrat Party. It's now the Democrat socialists, right? They're socialist Marxists working with Islam. That's the red-green axis. But now they've taken over the conservative movement. And it all comes down to the money. By the way, if you did not get a chance to watch my testimony that I shared and what I shared in Sugar Land, Texas, please go. It is both on this Rumble channel. So if you go to this Rumble channel and you look a little bit further down, you'll see the video of my testimony and what I shared in Sugar Land, Texas. Please watch it. Please share it. Make it go viral. It's on my Facebook page as well. This is the link to the Facebook page there. But it's easier if you just go to Rumble and share it from there. But we got to wake up, folks. And yes, Georgina, Sharia is Islam. Islam is Sharia. Don't listen to these elected officials that tell you, we're going to ban Sharia. Because if you ban Sharia, you must ban Islam. Sharia means the way or the path of Allah. Sharia is everything that a Muslim is commanded to do. Religious, dietary, governmental, legal, political, criminal, every aspect of life for a Muslim is governed by Sharia. You cannot separate Sharia from what Islam is or vice versa. So don't listen when they say we're going to ban Sharia, because they're not going to ban Sharia. They have to ban Islam. They have to come out and say Islam is antithetical. It's a theocratic system. And they have to be able to come out and say we cannot have Muslims running for office and being elected, because look at the allegiance. Look at the videos of the sheriff in Minneapolis there, the Somali Muslim saying, I am first a sheriff for the Somali Muslims. Look at Ilhan Omar saying, I am first a Somalian. Look at Rashida Tlaib saying, I'm first a Palestinian. They are showing you they're enemy combatants. They're enemies of this nation. And we better get serious. And there better be some major pushback on the Trump administration. The problem is you got too many evangelicals who are compromised and confused and part of this interfaith, like Pastor Mark Burns, who I had exposed earlier as a MAGA pastor, who is saying, oh, Islam is peaceable and wonderful, and Muslims are peaceful. I know, don't listen to anybody that tells you Islam is violent. Don't listen to anybody that tells you they're violent verses. These are the kind of people that evangelicals are hanging out with. This is the kind of people that are advising the President of the United States, along with Paula White, who had no discernment on May of this year at the White House during National Day of Prayer event when I was there, had no discernment when the Muslim chaplain got up and said the words from Surah chapter 1 that is cursing Christians and Jews, and sat there and bowed her head in agreement with it. Had no discernment to understand the spirit that was behind that, the spirit of Antichrist. So, the translation, Lil Susie, of what they were saying is there is no God but Allah, and that it says Rasulullah. That is the reference to the prophet. So that when they say La ilaha Allah Akbar, so they start with Allah Akbar and then La ilaha Allah, and then they go into Rasulullah. That means that there is no God. First of all, Allah is the greatest. There is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is the final messenger. By the way, that's also the Shahada. If you say that, that's the first pillar of Islam. You say that, if you say that with sincerity, you become a Muslim. So if you got Christians that are there saying, oh, look how wonderful it is, the Muslims are just praying to God, let's all pray together. Yeah, if you say that phraseology, you've just now renounced Christ. You've now just denied Jesus Christ. Because if Islam is true, if the Quran is true, the Bible's got to be a lie, folks. And vice versa. I got to go. But I am fired up, folks. I am fired up. This is an absolute scam. And you guys got to share this show. Share it with people to understand. There is no red state buffer when it comes to the infiltration of our nation by foreign Muslim enemy combatants who are not going to assimilate, who hate this nation. And there's two options. Either we evangelize them or we're going to have to fight them. Pick now. Either we evangelize them, we get trained right now. Churches, pastors, we get trained right now and we evangelize them, or we're going to have to fight them. Or they're going to subdue us and kill us like they are with the Christians in Nigeria, Sudan, Congo, Mozambique, Pakistan, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and so forth and so on. Lord, help us. Lord, wake up your people. Wake up your people. Folks, this is year end. And if you believe in this content, you want to support us, you want to allow us to go out. So many times, again, we travel, we create these presentations. I can't tell you how many hours and hours and hours I put into research, but all for the grace of God, all for the glory of God, all for the equipping of the church. And then we travel, we create content, we do these shows, and we put it on Rumble. And none of this we charge for, right? So your support, your donation helps us to keep going. And this is year end. We're now in the month of December, year end. And so if you would prayerfully consider making pray and ask the Lord, whatever the Lord puts on your heart, pray and ask the Lord, should I support this ministry? And if he says yes, Lord, how much? And I just pray that you would just obey whatever the Lord puts on your heart. If he says nothing, then don't support us. But if he lays on your heart to support this ministry, then please obey, because we need it to not only finish the year off, but to start 2026 strong and ready for this battle. Boy, has this issue in this last year come to the forefront. The Lord was right. When I was done 2024 talking about this, I thought nobody cared. But in 2025, as we prayed, the Lord said, no, not yet. I'm going to bring this to the forefront of my people. That was in prayer. Boy, has he brought it to the forefront. Boy, is he bringing it right to our faces. What are we going to do now? What are we going to do? Are we going to ignore it? Or are we going to rise up and stand against this evil with the truth, with the love of the gospel, with worship and prayer? Everything we did in Sugar Land, Texas last week, we must do in every city across this nation, in every community, in every church should be preparing right now if they're not compromised or Laodicean. So Lord, help us, but prayerfully consider that donation. Thank you to all of our Gideon Army. Thank you to those of you who support us monthly. You are the lifeline of this ministry. You keep us going. You set our budget. Thank you for that. But prayerfully consider. If you want to mail it in, by the way, just make sure you put on the check, the memo line, year end. So we know to make sure we give it to year end before December 31st. It can come in after December 31st, as long as we know it's year end and it's dated before December. It's just got to be dated. Your check's got to be dated before December 31st. It's okay if we get them afterwards, but as long as they're dated before December 31st or on or before December 31st, you just put year end on the memo line, or if you want to do online as well. So God bless you guys. Thank you so much for being with us today. Pastor Sharam Hadian, Lord willing, we will be with you guys on Thursday night, right here, live in studio, back again with another episode. But again, share this, folks. This red state is a mirage. Caution, caution, caution. I've given you the evidence today. And go and check out those Rare Foundation articles. Share those as well. Have a blessed day. God bless you guys. Stay faithful to the Lord in everything that we do. Put him first. First and above all else. Pray, Lord, how do I make you first in my life? In everything. Preeminence. The preeminence of Christ above all things. We will never bow a knee to this antichrist spirit that is Islam. We will never bow a knee to these Muslims. Never, ever, ever. will we bow a knee to this ideology. God bless you guys. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you, Lord willing,